That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, got it, Charlie. Thank you so much. Carol Master, Tim Stanovic, live here at Bloomberg headquarters in New York City. All right, hard to keep track. You know it. We have watched the headlines come fast and furious. We are trying, though, when it comes to the U.S. administration's policy on U.S. tariffs. What we do know at this hour, President Trump said he will exempt Mexico from his new 25% tariffs on any goods and services that fall under the North American Trade Agreement that he actually renegotiated, during his first administration. So this does offer a reprieve for a major U.S. trading partner.
A reprieve, but perhaps just until April 2nd. Back to our D.C. News Bureau and Bloomberg Intelligence senior policy analyst, Nathan Dean. It's hard for us, Nathan, to keep track of it. What are you telling Bloomberg clients about what they need to know in terms of timing and how much these tariffs are going to affect them?
Yeah, so what we're coining this a shock and awe strategy for tariffs, where President Trump comes out here and says, look, this is what I'm going to do. It's going to happen. I'm not going to negotiate. And we saw this with Canada and Mexico. Tariffs are on, 30-day extension. Tariffs are on. Now we're seeing the exemption for Mexico. So come April 2nd, which is the next major catalyst, obviously there's potentially some negotiations with Canada to go between then. But with April 2nd, clients need to prepare for this idea that these reciprocal tariffs are going to come. But they also have to prepare for the idea that there are going to be exemptions. The one thing that President Trump does not want to see is sticker shock amongst the consumer base. So if you're talking about any types of goods, we saw the big three automobile makers in there, they got their exemption. So I do think that President Trump will be amicable to some exemptions when it comes to April 2nd. It just may be in the days after April 2nd, not the lead up to it. So you have to certainly pay attention to it because it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Can I just say, did anybody see the trade deficit today, widening to a record ahead of these tariffs? I mean, I know people might be bringing stuff in to get ahead of them, but I mean, we import a ton of stuff. So are we talking ultimately, Nathan, about a lot of exemptions to come?
Well, that's the challenge here is because, every industry is going to want their own exemption. The big three automobile makers were in there. Tim Cook from Apple could be in there next time talking about an exemption for the tech industry. So, what I think needs to happen here is, we prepare for the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is reciprocal tariffs across the board. But then also you just have to remember that what are the industries and what are the consumer facing goods that American people want President Trump to bring the price down? Food in particular. This is something that drove a lot of voters to him at the end of in the election. So I think what the White House will do is they'll look and see, okay, what industries in which sectors do we think are going to hurt the American consumer more than others? And look, automobiles, technology, that's something that Americans buy quite a lot of. So I wasn't surprised to see the exemption for the automobile makers there. So it's really hard to tell, though, because there's only one person that decides whether these tariffs are on or off, and it's President Trump. And so we just have to, prepare for one scenario and prepare for the other.
Nathan, I know this is fast moving, and I know that we're only getting details sort of as they come out day by day and even hour by hour. But have we been able to, has Bloomberg been able to quantify now, given the 30-day reprieve from the tariffs on Mexico, what actually is tariffed in terms of amount of goods?
Yeah, so we were looking at this morning, and obviously the exemption is for all goods that are found within the USMCA. We think that's probably close to 100%. Not exactly, but even the president of Mexico this morning, the president of Mexico said in her briefing that's pretty much everything. So, I want to say that, obviously these, the headlines are there and so forth, but, we think it's effectively a push-off of the tariff until April 2nd. The situation obviously is a little bit different in Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and President Trump have been feuding a little bit on social media, and I think that's probably going to continue because what we discussed this yesterday on the program, the negotiation stance that we saw coming from Mexico was different than the take that we saw it was coming from Canada, and it looks like it got different results. So unless that relationship between Ottawa and Washington changes, the Canadian tariffs may be here until April 2nd, if not longer.
Nathan, I mean, we can't get in his mind. We don't know what he's ultimately thinking, but what does President Trump ultimately want? Is it tariffs and pushback? Is it something else that he wants from these countries, from our allies, from our major trading partners? Do we know what it is?
I think what it is he wants a fundamental shift in terms of the American economy. If you listen to Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, in his speech this morning, he was talking about how, manufacturing can come back to the United States. The challenge with that is that in order to build a plant or buy a plant or shift the supply chain, you're talking about a 3, 4, 5 year, time frame. And, tariffs, on the other hand, are going to have an immediate time frame in terms of price and consumer impact. So that's, I think, the challenge for the White House here is you have a long-term strategy and a long-term goal, but you're going to have to deal with short-term pain in the interim. The question is, will the White House stomach that short-term gain or short-term pain and the economic hit in order to achieve their long-term goals? I'm not so sure.
Well, it's interesting. When you talk about supply chains, we've talked with our Mark Gurman about the Apple supply chain, as massive as it is, and how that would take a long, long time to shift in terms of, so much over in China.
Well, how much time did they spend building it up in China?
Several decades, right? And ultimately that assembly to try and replicate that, create that somewhere else, that is something that would take many, many years to do. Nathan, as always, thank you. Nathan Dean, Senior Policy Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from our Washington, D.C. Bureau.